Just
live.
asking about it too.
So I just did that over there, and I just need to do something else here. But hopefully we are live now. Um, you can see us out there. Some of the things I'm still trying to make sure everything gets together. So hey, welcome everybody to Let's Stay Together Talk. Um, we got an interesting show. I mean, this is going to be a powerful segment where we're going to be talking about a lot of very special things. So I definitely want you all to be a part of this. We got Tracy out there online as well. You never know if something that she wants to talk about, she might call in and check in with us. And so we do want you to go start. I may start some watch parties or something like that on my phone or something like that. But we are working some things to make sure that we give you a show that's really going to let you understand about how we feel about some of the things that are happening. Systemic racism. We're going to be talking about that. How systemic racism basically started, and you would. I mean, if you look back in your history, it's been around for the longest. Even our government has been a part of systematic racism against African American and people of color. And so we're going to be talking about that. The topics we're talking about, I got to kind of grab these things. I know you gave it to me. It's amazing when I write these topics down and I can't remember them myself.
You want me to pick it up?
Yeah, you can pick it up.
Oh. First, we're going to kick it off with Christian Real, and we're going to be talking about should Christians protest? You want me to keep going with all the other topics?
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. You got to be here and join this one because this is going to be deep. The fear of blacks being equal to whites, eradicating the mentality of racism, exposing hidden racism. And of course, that relationship letter is set by the belief in 2020 and Club 50, menopause belly. Yes, ladies, menopause belly. So we got, what's your word? Plethora?
Plethora, yeah.
Of great topics we're going to be talking about.
And so, I mean, the interesting thing about this is that I don't know how that Club 50 thing is going to work in there, but it just seems interesting. So we are going to get our show started with our Christian Reel and talking about that. We want to talk about should Christians protest? So that's what we're going to be talking about. Should Christians protest? So, baby, what do you think about that? What do you think? Should Christians be a part of the protest?
Absolutely, they should be a part of it. The problem is the world has been so conditioned. I have to load this. The world has been so conditioned, maybe not, for Christians to separate to have the segregation of state and church. And I think we need to be, as Christians, a part of this and have our say on what's going on in the political realm. Because if you don't, you just have to deal with what's given to you. And you don't want to do that. You want to know ahead of time, be a part of it, be abreast to it. Because if you're not, changes have to be made. And a lot of people, I hate to say this in the political realm, some of them might not be Christians. So I think we should protest.
Yeah, I mean,
in a decent way.
A peaceful protest is what we always want to do. But you've got to understand, biblically, there has always been a protest. Jesus Christ came on this world to protest the injustice that was being done to the Jewish people. You can sit back. We should be able to hear you. But that's when Jesus Christ came into the world to protest. And I'm going to read this off to you. He protests against the Roman Empire for the treatment that they did against the Jews. He protests against the scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and called them hypocrites for how they were treating their own and not taking care of the poor and not feeding the hungry. I mean, so he was in many places of protest. And you could almost say somewhat, and I don't want to get Jesus mad at me, but you could almost say that he was a little bit violent when he went into the synagogues and saw them, trading and buying things and bartering and doing things that you shouldn't do in the synagogue, he knocked over the tables and said, "You didn't change this to like a house of thieves." He was protesting against injustice at that time. Proverbs 31:9 says, "Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and the needy." So, yeah, protesting is something that Christian people should do, and it should always be a peaceful protest at that. And so, we do believe in, the protesting that Christians are up to right now. And I am happy to see that a lot of Christians are protesting. I'm looking, yes, they should peacefully protest. That was Tracy was telling us there. And we do believe that you should peacefully protest. But we want to get some more opinions from you all. Why should you do that? Proverbs 21:13 said, "Whosoever closes their ear to the cries of the poor will themselves call out and be not answered." And so this is the Bible said, if you hear the cries of the poor, the cries that the poor said of injustice. Martin Luther King was great on standing for injustice. So when you hear those cries from people who are saying, we're tired of being systematically, oppressed, systematically looked at as being thugs or villains, or systematically thought as being a problem just because our skin is darker than yours. When you look at some of those things like that, it is our responsibility as the church to get out and protest. Now, I don't know about you all. Maybe I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. I have not seen a lot of churches out there protesting. Now, I've seen churches at a standard, at a place doing a protest, but not necessarily walking out to protest. You see more. You see more churches maybe having something at their church or on a street or something like that, and not literally out there protesting. And I could be wrong, because it could be out there, you just don't know. But
I haven't seen that, unless it's a major issue targeted at something, or a member of a church member might have been shot and killed. Then I see that. But as far as with the George Floyd, I know it's been preachers out there, but just the whole congregation walking the street in lieu of that person, I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, I'm sure there's some people out there that are doing that. But the thing of it is that, is the church stepping up and being more vocal than people who don't go to the church? This is when the church needs to be more vocal about injustice, because that's what we are there for, to fight for the needy and those who cry out for injustice. But I'm not seeing it as much as other people are doing. And so that's what I'm saying. Is it something that the church is doing continuously, or is it just something that you just see, where a couple of churches are doing things and it's okay,
Yeah, that's what we're seeing.
And that's the thing I'm saying. Church, we need to step up and say something more about what's going on. So we're talking about, should Christians protest? And I just think that, yes, they should protest, but you want to see Christians doing it in a more stable way, and I don't know if I'm actually seeing that as much as I would like to. And so this is a question we're asking: should Christians protest? And we want to know from you, what do you think about that? We're getting a lot of highs out there. Hello, everyone. I see Vanessa's out there, Kenny's out there, Tracy's out there on Facebook. Hey, for all maybe all those who are listening to us on Soar Radio, you can go to Facebook, go to Let's Stay Together Talk, and join us. We got people out there who are basically sharing their thoughts with us about Christians protesting. And so we need to know from Christians, are you out there? Are you a part of the protest? Have you sat there and, been a part of it? I've saw some people on Instagram, being a part of a protest, but I don't know if it was necessarily a Christian church. One time I did. I asked a young lady, I said, hey, is this, because she goes to our church. I said, hey, is this New Faith? And she tell it was another church that was doing that. And so, it was nice to see that the churches are out there. But the question is that are we really being a part of the protest the way we should?
Well, you know what? If you can't get out there in the trenches with them, like the way we're protesting during the airways, whatever platform you have, get out there and let your voice be heard, because that's the only way you could do it. Some people are leery about walking the walk out there because of what's going on. But if that's not your cup of tea, try another flavor. And like I said, our flavor right now is the airwaves, the internet, social media. You can protest in so many ways. It's great to walk the walk with the people, but if you have reservations about it, I don't recommend that you do it, because you're going in there with a fearful heart that you're anticipating something to go wrong, and we don't want that. So whichever way you feel comfortable of protesting, then you know what? Do you.
Yeah, I mean, and you do that. I mean, there are a multitude of ways, and I didn't say plethora this time, a multitude of ways that you can protest. But there have been a lot of churches, some of our non-African Americans churches, that have believed that, this is not a thing of God. We shouldn't be out here. But this is what God was doing. Some of them since changed the tune, but the philosophy of the churches as a whole, especially evangelical churches, has been that this is not something, from the past. This is historically, this is not something that we would be involved in, because it's more of a worldly issue and not a godly issue. But that's not correct, because God came on earth to handle worldly issues. So you cannot say this is not a worldly, this is a worldly issue, not a godly issue, because God formed the earth. And so, of course, if it's a issue that God sent Jesus, his only begotten son, to take care of, then yes, the church needs to be a part of any kind of injustice that we have. Now, I could have looked on there and saw that I spelled the word should incorrectly.
And I just caught that.
Well, and I will correct that.
And put an S behind the Christian. But that's all right, because baby got a banner up there. Thank you, Tracy, for noticing it, and it's going to be corrected momentarily. But hey, we want people, when you come on and say, what are you talking about? What are you? Now you would know, and just put the S behind that. And when you find out, you join in.
Yeah, you join in, and it's like me rushing and stuff like that, doing too many things. But we should be very concerned about that when Christians believe that a situation on earth that calls for injustice to be, looked into and peacefully fight for, then they're not doing it. Now, here's what Deuteronomy said on 1:16-17. I have charged your judges at this time to hear the cases between your brothers, and judges righteously between the man and his brother who is with him. You shall not be partial in judgment. You shall hear the small and the great alike. You shall not be intimidated by anyone, for the judgment is God's. And the case that is too hard for you, you shall bring to him, and he shall hear it. And so this is what biblically they were doing back then. If there was something that needed to be judged, if there was some injustice that was happening, Deuteronomy, was basically saying, your judges, you have to be fair, you have to be impartial, look at it and make a righteous decision. And if you find something that's too hard for you to do, spiritually, that you cannot do, you are supposed to come to God in prayer for a spiritual answer of how you're supposed to handle this situation. So it has always been the biblical mindset to stop a wrong and change it to right, to remove something that could be sinful, because systemic racism is sinful. I heard this one pastor was speaking, was looking at this thing. You got to see this thing called White Savior. I'm gonna get the title for it, but it was an amazing thing. I had watched at least 3 times. But I heard this one white pastor said, white Christianity is an idolatry. And I'm like, wow. Because basically the theology that we received in the United States of America was filled with white supremacy. And that's why you see every time you used to go to church, and I know I used to be young, the only thing you would see was this Norwegian-looking white Jesus that made white people say, this is how Jesus looked, looking like us. And so you felt that systemic racism because you already felt like you didn't look like the creator, God himself. And this is the theology that was brought to us, to America, when they came here. Not the theology that you see in the Bible, which says nothing about race, because we learned that race was basically something that was built upon labor, but because it was something that they wanted to do. So we have to protest against those things that are happening. And if we don't, then we're just sitting by and allowing the world to have dominance over, Christianity.
I got a couple of comments.
Okay.
From Vanessa, she said, you will find members protesting, but ensuring they are visually noticed as a certain church is not, and I have never seen occurring. And James Wells said, yes, they should. So Christians should get out on the front line.
Yeah, and they definitely should get on the front line and stand up for the injustice. And I'm happy to see that. What I'm seeing, and it may just be politically, you're seeing a lot of, actors and singers and, athletes getting a lot of attention for their stands, and rightfully so. You still ain't heard the NFL sit there and recognize that, Colin Kaepernick was the vocal point for this. And we're still waiting to see if they're going to do something like that. But we're not really, you're not seeing the Christian church doing this as much. And what I have not seen, I may have to look at Joel Osteen or something. I haven't seen a lot of statements, and again, correct me if you're listening on the radio, you got to go on Facebook and let me know, correct me. I haven't heard that many statements from Christian leaders condemning this hatred of racism that we seem to have in America. And we're going to talk about that. I mean, we're going to get really deep in this thing.
I haven't seen
about what we're going to be talking about, because there's going to be some subjects here. We're going to give you an educational lesson about systemic racism. You've got to be a part of this. This is going to be a history lesson of teaching you about systemic racism in the United States, and how it has been so much in this United States of America that it's almost, it's been around so long. I think white America doesn't even believe that it's part of it, because it's been systematically a part of their lives since they've been here. Generations. And when you see things like that and you hear about things like that, it can be, okay, well, this there's nothing new. When my father, my father's father, my father's father, and my father's father.
So why should we change?
This has always been this way. So yeah. So why should we change what we have? We lived already. I heard one commentator on Fox News says white people are not systemically racist against black. They're not trying to purposely do anything against African Americans, there may be a majority of them that are not, but there are a lot that are, and the other ones are just not saying anything. So I'm liking the fact that I'm seeing this coalition where people are coming together and they are, speaking. We had a rainbow coalition of whites, Latinos, African Americans, different nationalities are out there, and they're saying that this is not right. We need to stand up and fight for what is right in America. What you got for me?
Okay. Let me make sure I'm pronouncing it right. We were talking about that direct topic, systemic racism. A lot of people, from what I was reading earlier, kind of got confused with what is systemic racism, and it's the same as institutional racism. But to break this down for me,
You finna go into that now?
oh, okay. I thought you was about to go into it.
No.
Oh, okay.
We
You
still
said
talking
Christian
about
real.
Yeah, we talking about
Okay.
Christian real. You stepping
That's
ahead.
what I say. Are you going into it now?
No, I'm
'Cause
not going into
that's
it
the
now.
part Betty Shabazz gonna come out on. Okay.
Yeah, but we're gonna talk about systemic racism, but we're just gonna finish up with the Christian real.
Mhm.
So we just want to know should Christians protest? Hopefully your answer is yes. Christians should protest, and we're gonna do a little bit talking about that when we come back. And she's probably read some of my notes and stole some of my things and stuff like that, because I'm gonna be talking about systematic racism, and I got notes for that. But what we're gonna talk about on our let's talk about it. We're going to talk about systemic racism. That's the topic. But the three things we're going to be talking about is the fear of blacks being equal to whites, eradicating the mentality of racism, and exposing hidden racism. It's going to be very interesting because we're seeing all of these corporations coming out now saying they condemn it, they condemn it, they condemn it. Publicly, they're saying this. But what are they doing behind closed doors? We're going to talk about that. And so, hey, we're going to play some music for you right now, and then we're going to come back with a powerful segment of systemic racism. We're just trying to educate you all about some things. But if you're on Facebook, you got to hear this, and it kind of troubled me. Love the brother, he's done some great things. But Snoop Dogg has done something he said he's going to do something for the first time in his life. And when I heard what it was, I was troubled because I'm like, I cannot believe this. So we're going to talk about that on Facebook while we're playing the music. So if you haven't done already, join us on Facebook Live. We're live right now. Join us Facebook Live. You can go to Let's Stay Together Talk show, and then find us there. And we're going to be talking about Snoop Dogg and some things and other kind of things that kind of will shock you a little bit. So hey, this is Rick McCain, along with my baby, my girl, my boo, author Brenda McCain, and Tracy Brown Howard is on Facebook with us. Hey, I want you to listen up because we're going to be playing some songs, all about this protest and what's going on. We're still, the last funeral was for George Floyd today. They did the final funeral, the resting for him. It was on television. But we're going to have some songs that's going to talk about, that. One song is called Glory, and that's got something with Common and John Legend. And then Angie Stone, you may have never heard of this one. It's called My People. It's coming up. And then I'm going to let you hear from a Christian brother by the name of Jermaine Dolly, and he's going to say, Pull Us Through. And then we'll have a couple commercials, and we'll be right back. So, hey, listen up. This is Rick McCain, along with my baby, my girl, my boo, author Brenda McCain. Listen up to this music. We'll be right back.
To the only place you can hear LSTD live. You're only on Soul Radio. Boy, we don't get so shut up and listen. Now that the Bratz is gone, let's listen to some grown folks, gospel, R&B, and talk. Brenda, let's do this.
This is a protest and a struggle against racism and injustice, and this is what we are working to eliminate in our organization and in our total struggle.
All right, I'm going to let that go on the radio. What you got for me? You going to read something?
They have a comment here that says, Proverbs 22:8, whoever sows injustice will reap calamity, and the rod of the fury will fail. And in capital letters, it says Trump.
Trump, huh?
There you go.
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you something. I don't know how he can make it through this time now, because it is amazing about how I should just say how he's still in office. There's no way he should be able to make it the president again, because all the things that's happened, in 2020 and all the lies and stuff like he said is just unbelievable. But hey, I was telling you all I was talking about what we have here about Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg did something that really troubled me because I've been telling people this constantly on this show. This is something you need to do if you plan on changing how systemic racism happens in the United States. Snoop Dogg plans to vote for the very first time. He says, I can't stand to see this punk in office. I'm like, the very first time? Snoop Dogg is 48 years old. So he's been able to vote since 18. So for 30 years, he never voted. You can't be in a society, especially the United States, and you don't use your democratic ability to vote. And I'm not going to say your Republican Democratic, but your ability to vote, you have to vote. And so it troubled me when I heard Snoop Dogg, I mean, come on, you're just voting? I'm like, why would you just vote now? That just threw me off. I could not believe when I heard that. What do you say about that?
I could believe it, but you have to look at it. The world didn't affect him that way. He probably wasn't thinking about it from what he used to do he grew up, let's put it that way. From where he was before, from where he's staying now, he wasn't all into it. It's a lot of people in our age group who probably, know about the struggle of people fighting to have us vote, but didn't care less because they didn't think nothing was going to change. One thing I can say, that man that's in the White House now has upset America to make you want to vote. I mean, granted, he didn't do it in 30-something years. So now, hey, get on board. You have a platform out there, Snoop. People look up to you. So, hey, use your voice. Use all the mechanism that you have been blessed with and get some people out there. You was long on the gravy train, but now you finally made it on the train. So do what you need to do.
But here's my issue that we have. When people sit there and say voting doesn't affect them, or, what was going on. It affected you. You just didn't know it. Your district, your city, your town, there was so many things that you was affected by, but you didn't understand that you were being affected by your government officials who are making rules, who are making regulations, who are making laws, putting constitutional amendments in there, and you had no idea because it wasn't to you affecting you. But it stopped a lot of ways of what you can do and how you could do things in your community and in your city and in your town. And so you need to understand that there is a problem with just saying, I'm not going to vote because I don't like the person. That's one of the reasons why Donald Trump is in the White House now, because nobody wanted to vote for Hillary Clinton. Well, you need to vote for somebody. And the only reason why Hillary Clinton wasn't going to be in there is because some emails that they fabricated about some of the things she was doing. That is crazy. And so, people, we've got to get out there and vote. You cannot be a part of this United States and don't use your power to vote and then complain about something, because you can vote people out. You have to do that. And so, hey, I love the fact that he's finally decided to vote, but hey, I'm not for that, because you should have voted when you were 18. A vote counts. Now, it may not get you what you want, because there may be more people voting against what you want, but you still have to vote, because it allows you to. The Bible says, let us not forsake the assembling together with one another. A vote, if you don't vote, you forsake the assembly together with each person that believes the same thing that you do. You need to be out there voting, using your power to vote, and not allow yourself to be a person that, because you don't like something, I'm just not going to vote. But then vote to change it.
But that's the truth of the matter. Unfortunately, because of the things that our race have not seen fair and for justice for us. We like, it does not matter, nothing's going to change. We're seeing it differently now. Like I said, when he got in office, I forgot who that man was that predicted and said he had to get in office to shake up the world, and we didn't know it was going to be to this extent, but to shake up the world for we could see how we need to make a change. And now, like I said, not saying with the COVID that he had something to do with it, he probably did, but we are seeing so much injustice from him and blatant crime and make a great America great again right in your face. It's like they're not hiding anymore. So since it's out there like that, it's shaking up everybody. Say, oh, bleep, bleep, no. We cannot let this man get back in there in 2021. Got to make a change. Like I said, it didn't hit home with Snoop. Snoop was like, okay, let me put the weed down and pay attention. And that's why I'm happy that he's paying attention, because he have a great following. It's like, get your people, your boys, your girls, whoever around you, and get them on out there. Him and T.I. are out there just, I'm loving it.
Yeah, but here's the thing. They've always had a great following. And at that point, which you having a great following, you should have been doing something with that following to affect where you live or where they live.
What's the name?
But that wasn't their concern, because, it was like, I'm just going to be doing this. But you can make a change by the number. Say that, I don't know how many people he got following. Say he got like 22 million people following. Do you know what 22 million people, if he got half of those to make a change and to vote the way he was thinking, do you know how much political power he could have at that point? That is something very important, that a lot of times these athletes and these actors and these rappers and these singers, you have a lot of power behind you that you can use, but because you're just saying, it doesn't affect me, but it does affect you. It's just you don't see it.
It's hitting his pockets or something. We got a couple of comments. Stephen, thanks for joining us. Stephen Bass, he has said, put the weed down and pay attention. And another one of the comments was, where is it?
Stephen was laughing at what you said about put the weed down and pay attention.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just saying you said it too. The other comment was, what do you expect from a gang-banging, weed-smoking person? Hey.
Well, I mean, there's a song
but
that says, there's a song that says everything must change. Nothing stays the same. I mean, how he started off may have not been what most people would have said was the way they wanted to start, but he has changed his ways, and he's more of a person who is trying to do things in a more honest and decent way. Hey, the Bible said we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. You got Conway out there, for like a minute, he's a Christian for a minute. Hopefully it's going to be lasting longer than a minute, but his voice can make a difference. Look what Kim Kardashian did with her followers. Got all the way to the White House and made a change to get somebody off of death row. I mean, you don't think that we can do that ourselves? That we can't make a change? We need to start telling people in our communities and stuff like that we're going to make a change. You're going to change the way we want to see things, or we're going to make a change. We're not going to have you here anymore. We cannot continuously allow ourselves to be selfish. When we sit there and say, it doesn't affect me, we in part of being selfish. It's just like you see somebody getting killed. Well, it don't affect me. Well, like the COVID virus, it's not affecting me as much. I mean, but it is affecting you. You can't go nowhere. Because you're not dying from it yet. Be thankful. Thank the Lord. But you can't sit there and say, well, it's not affecting me, and it's not my neighborhood, it's not in my child, it's not in my city. I mean, we have to stop thinking selfishly and start realizing that it says, united we stand, divided we fall. We have been falling so long because we just sit there and say there's no need for me to be united with each other.
For those who are just joining us on the Facebook side, we are talking about Snoop Dogg finally deciding to vote.
Yes.
And I'm happy he finally woke up and, lessened up on the weed and decided to vote.
Yeah, but it's like he's 48. He had a chance to vote since he was 18. And 30 years later, he's just voting. We cannot. And see, that's what scares me about that is that you're going to see a lot of our youth, which has the power to make pivotal change. With this situation that's going on right now, there is the power to make pivotal change. You've got your civil rights leaders. I don't even want to say civil rights leaders because we're not in civil rights anymore because we already got civil rights in 1968 when the Civil Rights Act was passed. But we need African American young leaders who are going to sit there and say, hey, I want to make a change. How do I make that change? Your vote makes a change. You being in politics make a change. You having an active voice in decisions within your communities make a change. We need to start doing that. Get ready, get ready, get ready, because our young people, how we move forward from today is going to be more pivotal based on what our young African Americans do. And I'm calling out my young black brothers. Don't let the sisters do this by themselves.
Please don't.
Don't sit there and say, this ain't my battle. It is your battle. It's your life. It's your life and your generation that's coming up after you. You need to start stepping up there with your sister and saying, hey, I am going to fight with you for justice for all of us.
You know what? Miss Anna made a good point. As long as he votes Biden, not Trump. You are right. Vote for the right person.
I don't want to politically say that, but I'm not saying you're wrong. I would vote Cookie Monster before I would vote for Trump. And this again is what we've got to be careful with. Laziness has gotten us to where we are now. We were lazy with our votes. We were lazy with our attention. We just thought, and everybody thought it was. Everybody just figured, Hillary's going to win. It's going to be the first female president, in the United States.
Woo!
It didn't happen because we got lazy. We got complacent. We sat there and we thought, hey, this is it. We're okay.
And it was a shoe-in for her until somebody found that little loophole.
Yeah.
Get on up in there.
Hey, we're going to be talking about something on our radio. We're talking about systemic racism. And one of the things we're going to be talking about, and this has nothing to do, and I hate to say this, but this has nothing to do with trying to be pro-black. It's just pro-right. Mm-hmm. We're going to be talking about why is there systemic racism. We're going to give you a history lesson. You've got to pay attention to this because we're going to give you a history lesson of what has happened to cause systemic racism in America today. And we're going to be talking about the three topics: the fear of blacks being equal to whites, eradicating the mentality of racism, and exposing the hidden racism. This is something I've been talking about for the longest, how you've seen all these companies talking about it out now, about, we condone this, we condone this. I'm gonna tell you something I'm gonna say on the radio. I went to a job interview about 2 years ago, and I looked up everything about this company, and I noticed that all the locations they had, I was going in for a manager's position. All the places they had, they didn't have but one African American there. And so as I'm interviewing with them, I asked them the question, what is your diversity policy within this company? It shocked them to death. Now, I already knew I didn't want the job, but I wanted them to let them know that I'm aware of the fact that in 6 locations that you have, you only have one minority in a management position. What does that say for me coming to this company when I see something like that? Hey, we're about to get ready to go back on the air. The last song is coming up. We've got Get Ready, Get Ready. So stay with us. We're going to be talking about some powerful stuff.
Yeah, one more song.
Huh?
Yeah, one more song when you come on.
No, it's coming on.
Get ready to listen to one of the top talk shows on the internet. No cap. You ain't heard. Turn it up. Well, now you know. LSTD is the best combination of gospel, soul, and talk. I need y'all to get up off those seats right now. Rick, Sean, what we talking about?
All right, welcome back to Let's Stay Together Talk. Your host, Reverend Rick McCain, along with my baby, my girl, my boo, author Brenda McCain. Hey, I hope y'all enjoyed that music. You heard Common was singing with, I forgot the guy's name already. John Legend, thank you. You heard that, and some great songs. That let me continue to play some songs. The new station we have here now, our new thing is some soul R&B, old school soul, baby, not that young stuff. Old school soul with some gospel music. We're gonna be putting that together for you. But we are talking about today systemic racism, and our topic we're gonna be talking about today. Oh my goodness. We're going to be talking about the fear of blacks being equal to whites. You've got to hear this because we're going to give you a history lesson. I know my baby want to start off with something, but she's taking over what I've got. But I'm going to let her start off with what she wants to say there. And then I'm going to bring in some things too. What you got?
I'm just going to get the facts and you're going to give all the soul.
I got facts there too.
I mean, you're going
right.
Because I'm about to read something off that I think we need to really pay attention to. The fear of blacks being equal to whites. Here are some reasons they fear African Americans. And I know we have some whites listening to us tonight, and you know we love you guys, but this is history right here, and I want everyone to hear that. Whites are threatened by the educated Negro, one who is upwardly mobile in black communities. With the smallest movement towards equality, whites fear that the country they build will be stolen by a black man. So what better way to keep the oppressed down is by keeping your knee on their neck, so they can't advance in America. Another attack that the white race used to discredit the black race was done by vilifying the African American by spreading lies and accusing them of raping and assaulting white women. So from that point, you can pick it up because we're going to all go through that massacre stuff today.
So we talk about systemic racism, what systemic racism is talking about. Let me tell you what systemic racism is. Now, systemic, this is the description of what systemic is. It's described as something that is thorough, intentional, methodical, and implemented according to a plan. So when you put systemic racism, what you got to look at is that systemic racism was something that was thorough, intentional, methodical, and implemented according to a plan. Now, systematic oppression says oppression by institute or systematic oppression is when a law of a place creates unequal treatment for a specific society, identity, group, or groups. Another example of social oppression is when a specific social group is denied access to education that may hinder their lives and future lives. So you've got to understand this. This is what systemic racism is. Now, we're going to go back. This is kind of a history lesson. Brenda's got some things she's going to read. We're talking about the fears of blacks being equals to white. And we're going to go back. In 1790, that's where I'm going. 1790, there was something called a Naturalization Act. They called it the Nationality Act of 1790. This was placed by this House, the Senate of Representatives of the United States so they could separate the races for labor. So they could separate the races for labor. I hope you heard that. This is when slavery became prevalent, so they can separate the races for labor. And there was a constitutional act put in 1790. The first time you ever heard the word white was in the Constitution, where it says, being a white person who shall have residence within the limits and under the jurisdiction of the United States for the term of 2 years may be admitted to become a citizen thereof with the application by the courts. That that means that you had to be a free white person in order to get to be a citizen of the United States. This was something that was done because if you was not a citizen of the United States, you was considered more like property. So this happened in 1790. Now it took all the way to about 1865 when the 13th Amendment came in, which was abolishing slavery. 1865 when they abolished slavery. And then the 14th Amendment came in and said it granted citizenship to persons that was naturally born in the United States, which included slaves. So from 1790 to 1868, which is almost like 100 years, you had to be a free white person to be considered a citizen or a human in the United States of America.
You know, we didn't have a chance.
We didn't have a chance.
That law in place.
And we're going to read some more things. Now, systematic racism was also in our government. Because if most of y'all don't know, in 1930, you heard this before, but in 1930, they had something called redlining. Systematic racism we're talking about. We told you that systematic racism is something that is intentional, methodical, and planned by somebody. Redlining happened in 1930. Under the United States, redlining was a systematic denial of various services by federal government agencies, local government, as well as private sectors to residents of a specific neighborhood and communities, either directly or through selective raising of prices. So what they did was they had a red line of all the neighborhoods where African Americans would live, and the government would not give them funding in those neighborhoods and raise the prices in other areas so African American and people of color could not move there. This is a part of systematic racism. So we're talking about, what's systematic? It's been around a long time that they would do something like that. There was a story that after World War I, the government wanted to infuse into the communities about $200 billion. I might be wrong with the amount, about $200 billion. It was said that 98% of that went to white people. And they were building suburbs and homes and stuff like that and would not give African Americans, it was less than 2% of that money went to them to help them. This is systematic racism in the United States. What we're going to do for you now, Brenda's going to read off some of the things when we talk about the fear of blacks being equal to whites. Do you not know that almost 200 years ago, we're talking about maybe 150, 200 years ago, black people were prominent in many cities across the United States. And what happened to them was the fear of blacks being equal to whites or sometimes had more than whites. And what happened to these black citizens who had the freedom at a time to live equally and be able to live and grow and prosper just as much as our white neighbors. But what happened? Start reading some of those things, baby.
You know what? Before I get to reading the white terrorism in America, a comment came in and said, time for it to go. Been going on way too long. Now, can you picture this? A community, a city, a prominent, affluent African Americans, lawyers, doctors, dentists, all of them, bankers, anything you ever wanted in one community, prospering together, pulling in all their money together. Now, we have about a good 6 or more of these massacres that took place because, I hate to say it, Caucasians was a fear of the African American, the smart African American people joining their forces together to overtake them. Colfax, Louisiana in 1873. was great for black people. They said they flourished. They burned that down in 1873. The next one was Wilmington, North Carolina
I want you to
massacre.
read what it says.
Oh, you want me to
Yes, I
break
want you
it
to read
down?
what it
Okay,
says
I'll break
on
it down for you.
Yes.
Colfax, Louisiana. Despite some people claiming America was great, and we know who that was, for black people, 7 years after the Civil War, black men and women were being massacred in plain sight during Reconstruction. One of the most horrific incidents that we know of was April of 1873 in Colfax, Louisiana. Approximately 150 black men were murdered by white men with guns and cannons for trying to freely assemble at a courthouse. That's all they wanted was justice, and they ended up dying. The next one, oh, and they called that the Red River, because that was the worst one. The next one is Wilmington, North Carolina massacre, 1898. Was a thriving area with a majority black population. There were also several black elected officials forcing whites to share the power. Of course, the threat of the Negro rule, look it up, created illogical white racial resentment. Approximately 60 to 300 people were killed. White supremacists overthrown the government to remove, check this out, to remove black Republicans from office, in which they did. The next one was Atlanta massacre in 1906. Like many race massacres, the violence in Atlanta at the turn of the century began with white women accusing black men of rape. On September the 22nd, Atlanta newspapers reported that 4 white women alleged they were assaulted by black men, a claim that was completely unfounded. Then you have, and up to 100 people was killed in that one. Next you have Elaine, they call it Elaine 12, Arkansas massacre 1919. This was the deadliest racial confrontation in Arkansas history, and possibly the bloodiest racial conflict in the history of the United States. Blacks outnumbered whites 10-1 and were demanding economic justice, as many of them were forced into sharecropping. A union was created to protect sharecroppers, and whites were outraged at even the smallest upward move to equality. And I believe over 200 people were murdered in that one. Next, you have the last two are the ones we are more familiar with. Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre in 1921. This is known as the Black Wall Street.
And you're going to stop because I've got something that I'm going to read.
Okay.
Because now we're going to go to St. Louis massacre in 1917. It says, during the spring of 1917, blacks were arriving to St. Louis at a rate of 2,000 a week, with many of them finding work in aluminum ore companies and the American steel companies in the East St. Louis. Some whites feared the loss of jobs and wages security because of the new competition, and further resented newcomers arriving from a rural, more different culture. Tensions between the groups ran high and escalated when rumors were spread about black men and white women socializing at labor meetings. All these rumors. In May, 3,000 white men gathered to downtown St. Louis, East St. Louis, and a roving mob began burning buildings and attacking black people. The Illinois governor called the National Guard to prevent it, but they couldn't stop it. Then on July 1st, white men driving a car through the black neighborhood began to shoot into the house, churches, and stores. A group of black men organized themselves to defend the attackers, but they were killed. This is the St. Louis massacre. Now we're talking about the fear. This is systematic racism, and we're saying the fear of blacks being equal to whites. This is all these stories about African American, influential African American communities that were thriving that whites didn't like. Chicago race riots in 1919. The Red Summer, you didn't read that one. The Red Summer marked the accumulation of steady growing tension surrounding the great migration of African Americans from the rural South to the cities of the North during World War I. Chicago was one of the northern cities that experienced violence, race riots during that period. Drawn to the city's meatpacking, house, railroad companies, and steel mills, African American populations in Chicago skyrocketed from 44,000 in 1910 to 235,000 in 1930. When the end of late of 1919, thousands of white servicemen returned home from fighting in Europe and found themselves with their jobs being gone, and the warehouse and the mills was filled by mostly African Americans. In July 27, 1919, an African American teenager was drowned in the lake after he challenged an unofficial segregation of Chicago beaches and was stoned by a group of white youth. His death, and the police refused to arrest the men who had caused it, sparked a week of violence between blacks and whites in Chicago. When the riot ended on August 3rd, 15 whites and 23 blacks had been killed and more than 500 people injured. An additional 1,000 black families had lost their homes when they were torched by rioters. President Woodrow Wilson stated that white race was agitators in the uprising. We've got more, y'all. I mean, it's a lot of stuff here that you don't see in your history books. Washington, D.C. race riots. Post-war Washington, D.C., 1990 was roughly 75% white, was the racial tinderbox. Housing in the short supply and jobs were scarce as ex-doughboys, which are infantrymen from the War of I, and uniform were begging. They had to be panhandlers on the street. However, Washington black community was then the largest, most prosperous in the country, with a small but impressive upper class of teachers, ministers, lawyers, and businessmen contracted by in a park called Latroit Park near the Howard University. By the end of that time, Red Summer was underway. Unemployed whites bitterly envied the relatively few blacks who were fortunate enough to prosper in government positions. Many whites were resentful of the influx of African Americans, and in July 1990, white men, many in military uniforms, respond by the rumor arrest of a black man for raping a white woman. The mob started rioting for 4 days. White police refused to intervene. 50 people were seriously wounded and another 100 less severe wounded. It was one of the few times when whites were wounded more than blacks. One of the few times. We've got so many stories here that we can share with you about this. There's one from Knoxville, Tennessee, where black businesses had to barricade themselves, and they knew about all the riots that was happening in 1919. 1990 was a pivotal time for rioting. They was afraid of in their homes, and they had to barricade them. And a lot of times when the police were there, they did not help them. And Knoxville, Tennessee, they had broke out after white mobs mobilized responses to black men accusing of murdering a white woman. These are all accusing somebody of something. 500 strong mobs stormed the county jail searching for prisoners. They freed 16 white prisoners accused of suspected murderers. Many of the black residents, aware of the riots that had occurred across the country, were armed themselves and barricaded in the sections. Didn't help them. The Georgia magazine at that time was publishing stories about white women being molested and raped by black men. This is where you always hear this statement, I'm sorry to say this, that black men always want white women. This is not something we say. This is something that's been perpetuated for centuries. This is a part of systemic racism. They alleged were reported multiple times. In September 22nd, 1906, the paper did that, and 25 African Americans and up to 25 to 40 African Americans were killed, and only 2 whites were killed at that time. So you got the Tulsa thing you're gonna do. That's gonna be the last one. We got so many different stories we could share here, but share the Tulsa because that's a Black Wall Street.
Yeah, the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre was the Black Wall Street that took place in 1921. When I mentioned earlier that you had just a plethora, Rick's word, I love it, of the bankers, the lawyers, the dentists, doctors, theater goers, everything you ever wanted in one community, and then you get you have the successful black person on the uprise of doing great, and then you have that negative impact of Caucasian people who refuse to see black people living better than them. So what do? They get upset, they get jealous, and they go and terrorize the whole community and burn it down. And I mean, that was, of all of them with the black community, that was the number one that was actually the Wall Street, that you had so many people that was flourishing. And then the last one was Rosewood, Florida massacre in 1923. This is the one John Singleton put on the map with the movie. This was so sad to me that once again, white lady accused black man of assaulting her, but she was having an affair with another white man, but didn't want her husband to be upset. So it's just easy to blame it on the African American guy. A nice community, flourishing black people, any excuse to just terrorize them, tear the city down. These are the things that, as an African American person, you had to live with our history of this. It's like you want to come up, you're trying to do right, you don't see us as humans anyway, but yet when we are doing right, oh no, we can't do right because this is not your world. We built this world. No, you stole America and you didn't build it. The sweat and blood of African Americans actually built America, but yet what was that claim that it was something, if we find it, we could claim it, right, that it's ours. I mean, it makes you think Thanksgiving in a different way when you just stole it from the Indians, but yet, once again, because you had the sources and the power to overpower every other race that wasn't white, it's saddening to me. This is where we are still in 2020.
And this is the history of what we're talking about. So when we say that there is a fear of blacks being equal to whites, we're talking about historically, this has been a part of what systematic racism has been about. We went back all the way to 1790, educating you on what it was, because slavery was all about labor. Whites needed someone to tend their farms, to take care of their houses and stuff like that. And that's when we start dividing the races. And you do know that the only race that doesn't have a hyphen on there, and our pastor brought this up too, you got African American, Latino American, Chinese American, Native Americans. Now they're native to this place, but they got to have Native American. The only thing you have is Caucasian.
Yeah.
Because that is a part of systematically changing into supremacy and saying that this is okay. Now I went back and I looked at it. In 1865, that was the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. We went from there to 1886, where the 14th Amendment came in, giving citizenships to everyone, including slaves. It took 100 years from that point where you had citizenship for African Americans to get the Civil Rights Act, which means we have the same rights as Caucasians. That happened in 1968. So from 1868 to 1968, we were free, but we still didn't have the same rights. Separate but equal. We still didn't have the same rights. In 1968, that's what King fought for, the Civil Rights Act. We are in 2020, and we're still trying to get equality.
Yeah, I want to read something to you from Vanessa.
Okay.
It's addressed to you. Rick, reasons why our mother's father was raised as a white Frenchman instead of a mulatto. He learned English in his adult years, and his blue, green, brown eyes and light skin helped. She says after he continued this roost here in Chicago so he could work as a porter and at a yacht club after he married. Oh wow! After he was married with kids. So I mean, you have to lie about your identity, and in order either pass or not pass. That's a whole different show that would be interesting to talk about.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing. Back in the 1900s, they were white society. The Anglo-Saxons. Christians were involved in this too. They were. Racist against everyone. They didn't let Chinese come into back in the United States over 60 years. Most other nationalities that came here, they didn't treat them well either. But the thing about it is that their skin was light, and so they was able to assimilate. But you couldn't assimilate African Americans because our skin wasn't the same, and so we couldn't assimilate as much as others could. And that's why you have this different thing with black, light skin, black skin, because the colorism that causes this, because we were all trying to assimilate so we could be treated equally. But that has never happened in the United States. And so when people talk about we want to come together, kumbaya, work together, we want it back to the way it was. No, we don't. It's never been the way it should have been. And this is just saying, if you understand systematic racism and how far it goes back to the time of Christopher Columbus came to the United States and did what they call the Reclamation Act, where if you come to somewhere, if you were there first, you can claim it as being the person that owns that place.
No, that Reconstruction Act.
Yeah, you can change how things were, and so now Indians who were here, their property was taken away, and blacks was only considered 3/4 human, and Indians at that time wasn't even considered human. And this is from the Anglo-Saxon Christian narrative. This is what Christians who came over with a Christ-like mentality that was filtered in with white supremacists or white supremacist attitude that made you believe that Jesus was a light-skinned white man, and that's how everybody should assimilate to be. And so, these are the fears of being equal. Whites have always had a fear that if equality is given to African Americans, that it's going to take something from them. They don't look at it as that it's going to provide something additional for them. Because all of our great inventors and African Americans have brought things to benefit the United States. But I don't want my job being taken by him.
Yeah, and that's what it was. Rufus has said that Caucasians are the descendants of the Vikings. Why do we expect them to be civilized? If you just listen to what all of the massacres we just said, the slavery that we was put through, and they always say blacks are like jungle bunnies, always violent. No, you can see where this violence has came from, because it wasn't just us out of the blue, let's just get jiggy with it and act crazy. No, they were more violent, and we were the oppressors and everything. The oppressed. So the thing that just makes me sick to talk about this is it's still going on in 2020. And we was talking about stuff that happened in the 1800s. So it's like, when is it ever going to end?
Okay, so we got Tracy who called in. Tracy, what you got to say about this?
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot I was on the thing. Let me turn my thing down a little bit. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Radio, but when you guys were talking about the colorism thing, it bothered me a lot, because someone had brought to my attention earlier this year, if you guys know the rapper Asian Doll, I'm not very familiar with her, but in this day and age, with the colorism, and it's hard enough that we're fighting with whites and other races to stand up for ourselves, but now we have a prominent rapper out there having us fight against each other because of her comment that a lot of light-skinned girls are posting Black Lives Matter, like you Blake are not racist too. You are fully dark-skinned girls all the time are like thinking you're better than us and talking about our skin color and calling us names. And it's really upsetting because at this point, first of all, she's a brown-skinned woman, and for her to put that out there in this time when we're trying to come together as one really bothered me. And like she said, we are still in the same place that we were back before we got our rights, because now here we are dividing ourselves up by color.
You know what, Tracy, like I said, that colorism stuff just blows me away. We are one race with a multitude of beautiful complexions out here. And we're still doing this whole thing of, you never think you're light, but compared to me, because I always say I'm that invisible complexion because I'm right in the middle. It's like you're not light, you're not dark, you just, the golden brown girl or whatever. But I don't understand us that way. This is not the time for that to be out here like that. That we're trying, it's another division to keep us separated. And right now, we're trying to stay together. For someone just to bring this up now, it's like, can you tell me what's the purpose of this again? I mean, that's what you want to ask this person.
I didn't hear the question.
I said, you just want to ask us, a rapper, what is the purpose of you bringing this up right now in the midst of the calamity of what we're going through right now? I don't get it.
You know, I guess because so many, what do you want to call them? So many public figures like the Beyoncés and the Jay-Z's and everything were putting stuff out here that was positive. I don't know. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm hearing myself. I don't know why she felt it was a need for her to come out and say something that in reality was negative, because I don't think anybody came at her or anything like that. But for her to put that out there, it just started a big thing. And it makes a difference when these I'm calling them public figures or stars or singers or rappers get out here on social media, because that's what everybody is listening to. That's what everybody is looking at. So people like us who are saying, no, let's stick together, don't mean anything when we have people like her coming behind them saying, no, let's keep on splitting up against each other.
Well, and that's just cultural that we have people like that. That's that, and I'm sorry to say this, that house person mentality that thinks that, they want to bring the focus back on negativity of African Americans. Every race has some kind of negative thing that involved in it, but we're now focusing on equality. So trying to break something down between black people and saying something about their colors and all this stuff like that is divisive, and it doesn't help with what we're trying to do now. We're trying to get to be equality among the races, and that should be the main goal of every person, black, white, Jew, or Gentile, that is talking about.
And what they're trying to do is to make you lose focus on what we really need to be focusing on. And the thing is us coming together, not us dividing one another. But you know what?
Absolutely.
Because everybody has the freedom of speech, and social media is that platform to get something out there very fast. It's like, okay, let's shake this thing up, which is crazy. So I hope her stuff die down real quick.
We stayed on this.
Right.
We stayed on this conversation too long. We got two more things we want to talk about. Hey, I'm gonna play a song real quick from the Cane Train request. I'm gonna be playing this one for a while, and then we're gonna have one commercial and come back. We've got to talk about eradicating the mentality of racism and hidden racism, and trying to get everything else rolled into this before the show is off. But this is Rick McCain along with my baby, my girl, my boo, all to Brenda McCain. Tracy Brown was once on Facebook, but I told you she'd have something to say. She called in, She got something she want to share, and let me tell you something. We love it. So listen up to this song that's from my boy Sam Cooke. I've been playing this a while. We got to start believing this. A change is gonna come. Hey, listen up. We'll be right back.
You are listening to the McCain Train Request here on Soar Radio.
So we're gonna keep on talking about some of this subject here. Tracy, I think what's happening a lot of times is that that fear of what African Americans can achieve really frightens white people because they believe that somehow or another they're going to lose something. And how do we get them to understand that they're not going to lose, but by equality and working together, we all gain?
You know, I think education. And I'm not talking about college education, high school education. I'm talking about educating people to real subjects as far as equality. You know, it bothers me when people say, I have a black friend. What does that mean?
Ooh, Lord.
You know, I hang out with black people all the time. You know, not I hang out with people, or I have a friend. You know, why are we still in this day and age singling us out by who we are and what we are and what we think we are? So we have to start educating people. No, I'm not your black friend. I'm your friend.
Right.
I mean, you know, you don't live in a black neighborhood. You live in a neighborhood. No, you don't have one black person who lives in a white neighborhood. You have a person who lives in that neighborhood. And I think the sooner that we do that, the easier it'll become where people just expect it to be the norm and not the abnormal. Or like how people say, oh, she lives in the suburbs, so she talks white. Why does she have to talk white? She talks educated.
Right. I mean, and
So we
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was saying we have to stop making differences like that. And I think the more we educate each other, like Anna was saying, there were things that she didn't know. Those were the same things, Anna, that I didn't know. You know, I mean, I have learned a lot tonight just listening, and I am a black person. So we have to be educated not only to our own race, so we can educate others who are not in our race, and educate our children so they can educate their children. So I think until we get real education, we're going to be stuck in this hole.
Yeah. Go ahead, baby.
That's why it is said over and over again, repetitively, you have to know where you came from. You have to know your past so you can know your future. For the individual that's African American in today's world, in 2020, that says, I don't see color, I don't see racism, there lies the problem. Because racism is so prevalent now, and this is a segue to the hidden racism we're going to talk about. You don't even have to look deep no more. Because they don't even hide behind a mask. They used to by doing certain things, but it's just up here in the last few years. It's so prevalent now that it's like, okay, racism is alive and well. Some people might not think it is, but it is. And the thing now, like I said, we're not trying to be a divided race. And that's exactly what the Caucasian race want us to do. Because they know once we do put our minds together and rise up, it is on, because we have so many, thank God, so many educated, beautiful African Americans that could reach back and help the less fortunate African American and pull us up together the way we used to. But we don't have that mentality like that because of, someone did put out there, because of the HN and the FN. And we know back in the slavery, that's the house and the field, which is that division of colorism going on right now that's keeping the division. And the crabs of the barrel that's pulling us down, that I don't want Tracy to have no more than me.
Don't stop listening.
Gotta go, y'all. We back on the radio.
We've got a lot more to discuss.
Okay.
Get ready for the second hour of Let's Stay Together Talk.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Let's Stay Together Talk. Your host, Reverend Rick McCain, along with my baby, my girl, my boo, Author Brenda McCain, and Tracy Brown Howard is on the phone with us. How you doing, Tracy?
I'm doing good. I hope everybody else is doing well.
Right. So, hey, we're talking about this systemic racism, and the first thing we talked about was about, you can still see it up there if you're on our Facebook. We were talking about, fears of blacks being equal to whites. we've got to talk about that, but we're going to talk about this other thing here that I have, and it's called eradicating the mentality of racism. But before we go, I want to give a shout out to some of our sponsors who always sponsor us, Airline Management. Hopefully they'll still sponsor us after this. I'm sure they will. We have a lot of great sponsors with us. Shout out to Soar Radio, 2-time Stellar Award winner for Best Internet Station of the Year. Already doing their thing for 2021 for Soar Radio Awards. You got to get your tickets now. If you're really interested, let me tell you something. If you've missed these Soar Radio Awards, you are missing a treat. It is a blessing. It is a joy. All the singers come out there and they just show off. I'm telling you, they do. So definitely get a part of that with that Soar Radio. You can go to Soar Radio to find out more about the tickets. What else you got?
Just want to say this. We did just have our alert. It was a tornado warning out for Dalton, and we are close to Dalton. It's supposed to have happened at 7:45. Hopefully that passed over at 7:53. So we're praying for safety that whatever's going on, that it has passed.
Absolutely.
No weapon formed against us shall prosper. I'm going to tell you, you see that little thing in the middle here? You can drop that down if you want to for your mic.
Yes.
Yeah, just push it down. So we're going to talk about, pull it out, push it down, pull it up to where you want to. Okay, we'll work on that. So we're going to talk about this. The second thing we're talking about, in a few minutes we got, we can only spend about maybe 10 minutes on this because we really talked a lot about the other thing. Eradicating the mentality of racism. The mentality of racism comes from training to me. That people are trained. The Bible says, train up the child the way he should go. And when he and when he leaves, he won't depart from that training. The mentality of racism is basically the thought process that I am going to lose because you are now infringing on what I can gain from. We have a mentality, Tracy, of racism to the point where we think that coming together only hurts me. It doesn't help me. How do we get this? How do we eradicate a mindset that has been trained for centuries to believe that I'm superior and anything you do that takes away from my superiority is going to take away from me, therefore I don't want you to be around?
I mean, first of all, you hit the nail on the head with what you just said. Is everybody is so worried about somebody else taking something away from them. I don't know if you've experienced hearing conversations about black athletes going to white colleges and taking away scholarships from white athletes, or a black smart person going to a college and they feel like they just got in because they black and they took their scholarship. It's simple-minded thinking like that we have to get away from. My blackness does not take away from anything that you are, what you have, or what you're trying to get to. Because I'm trying to get to the same place that you're trying to get to. And I'm not trying to get there because I'm black. I'm trying to get there because I want it. And we have got to stop that mentality. And again, the only way I feel we can do that is the education, especially the education of our youth. Because we see the commercials now and the little Facebook posts and everything where you see these children, blacks and whites and Asians and everybody all playing together because they don't know racism yet. They don't know the difference. So imagine a world where we don't teach a difference. Imagine where we could be after that. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not saying take away our history or anybody else's history. I'm just saying let's get to the point where it does not make a difference who or what you are, that we are just all human. We can drop race off the end of that. We're just human.
I'll tell you what, I say take away our history, because the history that we have been accustomed to, that is a mentality of racism, because we've been taught a history that doesn't include us. And so we need to get rid of the history that we basically had and bring it back to a point where you understand it. Like Tracy said, she learned so much. We all learned something. I mean, when I look back all this stuff and researching it, it was amazing to me that all of these influential African-American communities were out there, and that whites were so upset about what they were losing, they lied on these people just so they could kill and destroy and burn down their cities and towns. This is the mentality of racism, a systematic racism that we need to move. And this is when our young people need to come together, Brenda. They need to come together.
Absolutely.
And work together to make sure that you can remove or eradicate the possibility of thinking that in my mind I'm better than you just because I'm white. What do you got to say about that?
You know, I want to take this on a whole different level. Everything that we just talked about was on point and the truth, and that's one side of it. But when we talk about the political rule of the golden rule solution to racism, this blew me away when I was doing research. It was the law versus psychology. The law will always prevail over psychology, because psychology is how we feel about something. And whenever we're rioting, we're trying to put a law in place, in force. And when you put the law in force, we're not over the law. So the people that's predominantly in the law is going to benefit them. That's why they was saying in this read that I came up with that you really have to pay attention, because this is the systematic thing that's going on right now. Oh, you want to eradicate racism? You want to change? Okay, let's take it to the government. We're going to give them a little bit. And that's all they give us. It's like, let me dangle this worm in front of this fish. I'm going to give you a little bit, a little hook. And then that's where the hidden racism come in. It is a game, and unfortunately, when they say stay woke, you need to stay woke and prevalent and be there every day of what you're asking for. And like we were saying, what was it? Kim Kardashian made a change, but her husband helped her make that change because he's in good standards with Trump.
Now, which I don't know if that helps any.
Well, she got some right.
With each other.
You're right, two idiots. But anyway, but I'm saying that golden rule, they were saying if you want to change, yeah, it's going to have to go through the law, but how much are you willing to sacrifice to get that change?
But let me tell you something. It has to be through your voting. Mm-hmm. That's why I was mad at my boy Snoop Dogg talking about he just voting at 48 and 30 years later. But let me tell you something. You want to eradicate the mentality of racism? We need to start with our news media. Do you know that in the United States we still have more than 95% of the news people that are Caucasian? Do you know that we're still, you want to eradicate the mentality of racism? Why is it still 90 or 95% of the TV shows still Caucasians? Now, I didn't say people of color. Why is it that every time, if you want to eradicate the mentality of racism, why are you still having advertising, do commercials that are systematically tailored to white people, and anybody of color just gotta hope that they can get a part of the piece of the pie?
Fit in where you could get in. That's
why is the educational system so messed up that a black person educational ability is 10 times lower than a white person, even if they're in first grade? How are we going to eradicate the mentality of racism if you cannot see that it's there? Yeah. Mentally, you got to understand and see that it's there. You cannot say, I don't see it. How can you miss it? If you look at television and the only thing you see is you, then something is wrong.
And one of the comments says the victor teaches history according to their perception and values. So right, and because it is controlled by the victor. And when you think about it,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Brenda. Go ahead.
Thinking what Rick was saying earlier about how Caucasians wanted us to view Jesus Christ in the Bible, and how, you know, they just had this whole thing of what they perceive Jesus Christ looking like, and that's what everyone gravitated to. Oh, Jesus is a white person, blah, 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 blah. But, I mean, everything that they wanted, the white person on the money, the white person on this, it's like we're in their world, and I guess they figured you got to deal with it. It's sad, but that's the way they have this control over us, unfortunately. And another comment you have over here real quick says that racism is naturally being eradicated by our youth. They embrace each other as people first. The race car is slowly being pushed out the door. I will hope these young, what is that generation?
I kind of agree with that, Brand.
Okay.
I do. I kind of agree with that because I used to be a youth group leader at church, and I look at most of my kids. I call them kids, even though they dang near 40 years old now. Most of them have interracial relationships, and they embrace people as people, whether it's by race, sexual orientation, or whatever. But when it comes down to the social media aspect of it, a lot of people are afraid because the same people that I see who has biracial children, white husbands, white wives, are still not comfortable, and I don't want to say riding the fence, but saying, it's okay that I have a white wife, or it's okay that I have a black husband, because I think that people are still trying to do what they think is right in the media, right in society, because I was going to ask the question too, why is it that we have to take European history in high school and in school in general, but black history is an option, even for us being black?
Preach, Tracy.
I'm going to tell you something. I used to always wonder when I was in 8th and 7th grades, why do I need to know about the Inca Indians? And the story about them was not a good story. You know, I was like, why am I learning about the Inca Indians? Now I'm like, I would have loved to learn about the true history of Native Americans that was told truthfully instead of by the white supremacist attitude that we have. Let me tell you something. I'm gonna really hit hard on this. If you want to eradicate the mentality of racism, it has to start in the Anglo-Saxon church, the Protestant church, the Catholic church, which for centuries told white Americans that they were chosen by God to rule in the United States. For centuries they told them that. So we've got the church itself has to lament and be, ashes and throw ashes over them and being, lay down and lament for the sins that they have committed by making people of color believe that they need to assimilate to a God that is more of an idolatry than anything else, because there is no picture of Jesus Christ or God. And so when you implement that, you've made an idolatry of a man that you believe that simulates and looks like you. And so the church in itself has to ask for forgiveness for God, lament to the world, to saying that we brought this into the mentality of racism, and we need to ask forgiveness from God and the world for what we have done in society. If you want to eradicate the mentality of racism. Tracy, I'm just going to say this. We're going to go to hidden racism because we got to catch up. Eradicating what? We got to go to hidden racism. We're going to talk about that. Eradicating the mentality means that you have to be willing to go through a process. 12-step programs for Alcohol Anonymous. You have to first admit you're an alcoholic. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
We have to first admit in the United States of America that we have the mentality of racism. And until we do that, we will never be able to get that out of our mind. I love hearing the fact that y'all saying our young is doing better. But when they get older and they've been trained to look at someone different when they get in a position, if I'm still at a company that does not hire African Americans higher in a management position all across the United States, we're still the lowest number of management and higher upper management positions. You are not removing the mentality of racism. You're not eradicating it, because the only thing you're doing is talking loud and saying nothing.
And you know what, Rick, I just want to say this before we move on. I know a lot of you guys have probably seen my grandson pop in and out of the studio every once in a while, and he's very fair-skinned. And someone said to him, are you black or white? And, he was like, white? Because of his skin complexion. And then he's like, no, I'm black. And somebody says, but how do you know that? He says, I'm black underneath my skin. And I knew what he meant, and I just thought, that's right, my brother. It doesn't matter what you look like to society. You know who you are.
Wow.
And be proud of who you are, regardless of what shade of black you are. So now we have to teach these children, you know, yes, you are black, but it's okay. You know, it's okay to be out here with each other. It's okay to have friends who are lighter, who are darker, and to understand and embrace your blackness, but to know that it's okay to be a part of everybody else.
What you got, buddy?
I have a comment from Denise McGowan Tracy. Welcome to the McCain Train, Denise. Boom, that's the point. All I learned about black history, I learned on my own. From TV during the civil rights marches of MLK when I was a kid. From books, from movies. I mean, To Kill a Mockingbird will open a white little girl's eyes. I was stunned by how much I didn't know when I walked the African American Museum of History in Washington, D.C. Educate kids at an early age of the history of all cultures, the differences and the similarities. Just my opinion. And we welcome your opinion.
Yes, we do. We welcome all opinions. And this is not a dumb pile on the rabbit. You have to know Bugs Bunny for that. Saying that all white people are wrong. We're not saying that. We're just saying that there's been a systematic racism that has occurred for generations that we want to be removed. How great will our country be if we just saw a person for who they are? I mean, you know, I know that I'm African American. You can see that. I'm not actually to not see that I'm African American, but also see that I'm a human. See the humanity in me. See me as a person. You got one more comment?
Wow.
We're going to go on to the next thing.
The fear of knowledge kept black history out of the schools. Can you imagine the anger that would be created if we were taught how bad our ancestors were treated, especially if the teacher was white? Ooh, that would have been a riot in the classroom.
So am I a little bit behind on these things up here? What am I? Because I know we got something here. Me too. Patience.
You got a lot of comments.
Did I miss comments up here?
I read the ones up there, but from going down, you know.
I think Vanessa said, give Tracy's grandson a round of applause. Anna says, me too, patience, not my strong suit. My mother-in-law says she won't pray for patience anymore because she might get her prayers answered. Patience is not easy.
We're praying for a change.
Yeah. So, hey, we're going to go on, and we're going to talk about our last and final thing before we go on to our next, topic of the relationship. We may not get the relationship that in. We got to get Club 50. We should be able to get it in time. But we're going to be talking about exposing hidden racism. What do I mean about that? You're seeing all these companies coming out saying they condemn this, they condemn that. All these sports companies, these sports places, the Chicago Cubs, the Chicago White Sox, the Chicago Bulls and all like that, Chicago Blackhawks. I got a little thing against Chicago Blackhawks because I've been watching them since 1971, and they don't have any great policies on African Americans. They don't even want to keep African-American hockey players more than a couple of years before they get rid of them. So them coming out with a statement on that, it's what I call hidden racism. It's companies who are coming out in the open in public and condemning something, but if you look at historically how they have done things in their company, they have been very prejudiced against African-American and people of color. So you cannot now step out and say, we condemn this, and yet when we look at the historical background of your company, you never had. Just to give you a real quick thing, the Coyotes, it's I forget they're called the Coyotes. I forgot the location. I can't believe it. It's a hockey team. They just hired a CFO as their a Latino as their CFO of the hockey team. That's unheard of because hockey has been historically Caucasians and Middle Eastern people who are like Russian and Czechoslovakia, Lithuanian. To have him there, it's in Phoenix. There's Phoenix Coyotes. He just did that. That sounds great, but look at the historical thing. The NFL still doesn't want to acknowledge Colin Kaepernick he was right for bending on his knees, but yet they want to sit there and say, we condone this. Tracy, here's my issue. I love all these companies. I'm going to go to Brenda first. Brenda, because I went to Tracy 2 times. I don't want to be unfair. Brenda, I love all these companies that are doing these wonderful speeches out in public talking about how they condone this, how they don't believe in that. But when you look at the background of that company and you see they can condone it in public, but privately, hidden racism is still available in their companies and in their organizations. How do we accept these companies that are saying this when they haven't shown a pattern at all that they believe in equality?
They're showing up now probably because, we don't want to be the company that looks like we are racist people in a time where the world is trying to come together. So let's pick Joe Blow out of the blue. Even though we never had a Hispanic as a CFO or CEO, but let's do it now because it's a time for change. Yeah, that sounds good. Let's do the time for change right now in the midst of what we're going through in history, for we won't be no company left behind still as a racist company. So that's all what this is all about. It's for me to look good as this company. I mean, some people might have a good heart and they might say, hey, it is time for a change. This was a wake-up call. George Floyd just don't know all the stuff he done to wake up people. Even though, what's his name? Kaepernick, the football player?
Kaepernick.
Whatever his name was, on his knees the right way. It's like that didn't wake him up. This exposed a lot of stuff. So because I don't want to be totally exposed, let me do something totally different.
Tracy, what you got to say about that?
I was going to say, I agree with what Brenda said. Nobody wants to be that company or that person who's not getting on the bandwagon, regardless of how you really feel, because we know that a lot of people are going to be out there and say, hey, yeah, I'm right there with you, but they're going to go home and say, Lord Jesus Christ. So, people aren't trying to be the one who isn't woke, as they say. Like the lady that threw me off on the news that was marching, she was a white lady, and she was marching, and she says, I'm out here using my white privilege. And I'm like,
Jesus.
I was like totally confused for a minute. Then I was like, okay, she's still asleep. She ain't woke. But you feel like you got to do what everybody else is doing so that you won't look bad in public, or else you sit quietly in the back and say nothing at all.
Well, let me say this. I'm gonna say something people ain't gonna like. You can kiss my Jesus with these companies that want to sit there and act like they want to speak out now. We don't need no come now people. We need some people that are going to speak and stay that way. If you're just out in the open to make I'm sick and tired of all these commercials with people, we condemn this, we condemn that. Okay, if you condemn it, let the message of your mouth stand for something. Let's see some longevity behind that. I've got one comment that says, if sports fields reveal their true feelings about racist sports would cease to exist, as black athletes would probably leave. And then one says, tick me off, even if I was all white, those comments still would make me ill. She's talking about that white privilege comment that Tracy made.
Absolutely. I was absolutely floored when I heard it. And then it makes it not easy for us to identify the people who are really out here. Like a friend of mine was listening last week, you would see her picture as a white woman, but she has black grandchildren. You would see my sister-in-law who is white, but she's married to my black brother. My nephews and cousins, my cousins and things. So we have to learn to identify who is really out there fighting the fight with us and who's out there just trying to use their white privilege.
Yeah, and understandably, you can feel that you have privilege, but that privilege was based on the blood of a lot of people dying so that you could be above someone else. It's not a privilege to take something from somebody because you was afraid of them taking it from you. It's not a privilege when people were killed just because you didn't want to feel equal to them. That's not a privilege. That's a hatred. So when you sit there and say my white privilege, your white privilege came off the blood of hatred. Your white privilege came off the blood of racism. Your white privilege came off of the blood of your ancestors making blacks and other people of color slaves. It's not a privilege to beat somebody down when you have the gun and they only have a knife. You're not so when you think that way, that you're privileged, you got to realize that the only way you got that privilege is because you decided that you want to beat somebody else down so you can be better. And this is what I said about hidden racism. Be careful. You know, there's a song that says Smiling Faces. It says, smiling faces sometimes pretend to be your friend. Smiling faces show no traces of the evil that lurks within. You got to worry about those hidden racism, smiling faces companies is talking about, they condone, that's you. I condemn others, we don't stand for this is wrong, blah, blah. I love seeing all this, but when the marching is over,
it's over.
You know, they're still doing some marching.
No,
what's going to happen now? What are you going to do? You're right. It's over. I've done my part. I was there. I love the fact that you're marching. But then you need to march into your companies and tell them, hey, this is wrong. You treat Susie wrong. You do this wrong. You do that wrong. I ain't going to do that because they may say something to me. Well, then y'all need to all walk out with each other.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up. I was at my sister's nursing home, and like I'm just putting everybody out there now. I don't care. I was at my sister's nursing home, and I was insulted by an employee who happened to be black, and so the white manager came out to speak with me, and I could tell he was very cautious of how he spoke to me because of everything that's going on. And he said, you know, and we talked more, I really wanted to have my staff go out and take a knee at 2 o'clock like all the other hospitals were doing, but I was afraid.
Wow.
And I was like, dude, why? If this is how you feel in your heart, what are you afraid of? Your white friends judging you? You know, that we cannot be afraid of. Be who you are. Stand up for what you know is right. And don't worry about what other people think about you. Do the right thing, as Spike Lee said.
Yeah, and you want to do the right thing. But you know the bad thing about it, we go back to the mentality of that. White people, I will say this, I don't mean anything wrong. I feel sorry for them sometimes because they will turn on each other if they try to do the right thing. It's you know what it says, it's hard out there for a pimp. It's hard out there for a white person who wants to do something that's live around equality, because the mentality, the historical mentality of the white society has always been supremacy. Not equality, but supremacy. I'm better. I don't want you to be equal. We saw the thing with it's called White Savior. You need to look that up. It's called White Savior. You know, I got the title. I'm gonna bring it up in a second. We saw that information on there where the woman said, "I want to live in the community. I moved in this community because I knew it was gonna be all white."
Oh yeah, that just blew. I don't know. When I heard that, something just went right into my soul. She did not want to be around African Americans, period, because of course the value of the neighborhood will go down, but according to them. But that just blew me away. I'm like, okay, this is still, even now you get that. It's not just back in the 50s and the 60s. It's happening now as well.
Yeah, and you know, it's so sad that is continuously happening. I got way too many notes. I can't find the stuff that I wrote down. But you know, it's a shame that these things are happening. We read out to you a lot of information about this. This is why we deal with systemic racism. We went all the way back to 1790 to now, to 2020, showing you how systematically people have done it. They said systematic is something that is thoroughly thought out, methodically, intentionally planned. So systematic racism has been thoroughly, methodically, intentionally planned by those who are in a supreme position, Caucasians, and the government of the United States.
And some of the factors that it hits deep is the wealth, income, criminal justice, we know all about that, employment, housing, healthcare, political power, and education. All of these things as an African American, when they say hardest hit, that systematic racism hit us right there in those factors all across the board.
Yeah, and it's a shame we've done it. So I'm hoping that you all learned something from us on this. We were just trying to educate you about going back to the 1800s, where African Americans had influential places in the United States, all over the world, that Caucasians did not like, because they were even doing better or equal to them, and they rioted and killed and destroyed the community. Rosewood, we talked about Tulsa, we talked about Knoxville. 1919, if you look back to 1919, there was about at least 4 to 5 riots where African Americans were killed because white people did not want to see them being beneficial. So when you hear somebody say black people just lazy, they don't want to do anything, here's a history of showing you that they wasn't, that we wasn't, that we were actually doing good for ourselves when you allowed us to equally be able to move and do our own, establish communities and theaters and lawyers, and they had all that stuff that they were doing. So you sit there, you're shiftless and they don't do anything, they just want to go to jail. That's a mentality of hidden racism. That's the mentality of systematic racism, saying I'm going to knock them down so they cannot be equal to me. And so I'm going to make it seem like they're shiftless and don't do anything. And I'm going to remove it from the history of all the things that they've done, because we control what's written in the books. And we're not going to let you know that for 200 to 300 years, there was African Americans that lived and was influential and were wealthy. They had millionaires in the 1800s for African Americans. You don't know about that. You don't read about that.
You only get, that 1 or 2 token that they're throwing in history books. You know, like a Madam C.J. Walker, first female, which she wasn't the first one. But they give us a few. But it's like, as far as history, they keep it out the library, out the books. You would not be taught it in class.
So when you said you want to keep something from an African American, just put it in the book. That was basically what they did. They kept us out of the books. They kept us out of government. You had Republicans. They had one place you were talking about where they had African Americans that were running the Republican Party. They had so many of them in there. They ran them out.
Can't have this.
Can't have this. Like what you call, can't touch it. Can't be this. We gotta go. We got a couple of minutes left. I'm gonna play. We hopefully we educated you on some things. I'm gonna allow us to do the Club 50. We're gonna have to have the relationship letter probably go till next week. But I'm gonna play the Club 50 music and let Brenda talk about her Club 50, so she'll still love me tonight. So listen up to this Club 50, this drop, and we'll be right back with information on Club 50.
Listen up as author Brenda McCain shares an inspirational blog, Club 50 Golden Diva. Get ready as she drops knowledge and shares how living on the other side of 50 is where wisdom meets the woman. Lady B, do your thing.
Hello, Golden Divas.
Hello.
Hello. Last week at Club 50, it was the Golden Diva interview. I had the pleasure interviewing Dr. LaRonda S. McGrath. Our topic, eliminating racism and empowering women. This week at C50, I will be talking about menopause belly. I have to bring it back to us, ladies. What causes it and how to fix it. You can read both articles at theclub50.com.
All right. So, hey, baby, thank you very much for that. Club50.com. Read these articles. She's doing an excellent job with that. Hey, we hope again that you enjoyed that subject on systematic racism. We did again take you all the way back to the 1790s, talking about how race actually came into being. It was in 1790 they started actually bringing up race because race was about labor. They needed labor force, and so they had to separate the races based on the labor force. And unfortunately, African Americans, blacks at that time, Negroes, what they call us at the time, did not fare well and became into slavery. There was a time when slavery wasn't permanent, that people, the indentured servants could actually serve to get out of slavery, but they stopped that when an African American woman decided that she would use Christianity as her reason for getting out of slavery. And she, at that time, there was a law that said no Christian could be a slave. She won her freedom, and they changed the law, putting a new amendment that Christianity could not be a reason to get out of slavery. So these are all the things that you need to learn that are not in your history books. Tracy, you got anything last you want to say before we go?
Yeah, I just want to say, we got to educate, let this all go and come together as one. And like you said, Rick, don't let it just stop after George is laid to rest and everything. We as people got to keep this going until we get everything the way it's supposed to be.
Miss Brenda.
I'm just going to have to, like I was telling Anna, pray for patience, because I really want to change, because I'm tired. I'm tired of seeing the injustice of our people. And it's like I said, I just love all races, but when you come at us like this and the target is forced being black and white, it just breaks my heart. I'm tired. I'm tired of the senseless killings, murders, everything. So we have to do better as a race.
You're 100% right. We have to do better as a race and humanity. Let's take the word race out of it, because racism and race is just something that was brought in for exploration. You would exploit someone. We've got to start looking at it as just being human and humanity, and start loving each other for who we are. We hope you were able to learn some information about systematic racism from our show. It has nothing to do about being hateful to anyone, just loving, because that's what Let's Stay Together is all about. Hey, this is Rick McCain, along with my baby, my girl, my boo, author Brenda McCain, Tracy Brown Howard. We're going to leave you with about 30 seconds of Fantasia, I Believe, and we'll see you next week, 6:30. Woo-hoo! All right, everybody, we're going to go off in a few seconds. Hey, Tracy, thank you so much for being a part of the show, calling in. I love it that when you see something, you say, I got to call. And we're going to let you go. We'll see you next Tuesday. Feel better, do better, and be better. I want you to go out there and love somebody today, okay? Tell Cam, tell Cam that Cam Cares is coming up soon.
Absolutely. Love you guys.
All right. And for you all on Radio Land, we'll see you all later. Talk to you. Remember, come back next Tuesday, 6:30. We out of here, y'all. Bye. I'm gonna let the most of y'all just drop off here before I go. Some things or what? I'm going to turn this off. Goodbye, everybody.